Hey guys, tonight we're taking a truly uncomfortable journey back to the very origins of athletic competition, to the sun-drenched plains of Olympia in ancient Greece, famed as the birthplace of the most iconic sporting event in history, the Olympic Games. But forget the idealized images of noble athletes striving for peaceful glory. The pristine stadiums and the spirit of pure sportsmanship you see celebrated today. You're about to discover why the ancient Olympic Games were a brutal, bloody mess. A grim reality where intense competition often devolved into savage violence, where injuries were commonplace, and where the pursuit of victory came at a profound personal cost, often masked by immense religious ceremony. This wasn't a peaceful festival of athleticism. It was a grueling, often deadly, spectacle of human endurance and raw power. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the first event without severe injury, let alone an entire games. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly standing in the sacred Altis, the sanctuary of Olympia, around the 5th century BCE, a few days before the start of the quadrennial Olympic Games. The air is thick with the dust of thousands of pilgrims, the scent of olive oil used by athletes, and the pervasive anticipation of the upcoming contests. Grand temples dedicated to Zeus and Hera loom over the landscape. And the ancient stadium, a simple earthen track, stretches before you. You are a spectator, or perhaps an aspiring athlete, drawn by the immense prestige and religious significance of the games. But the grand illusion of peaceful glory is about to be shattered by the brutal reality of what these contests truly entailed. The ancient Olympic Games, held every 4 years in honor of Zeus, the king of the gods, were far more than just a sporting event. They were a profound religious festival and a central pillar of ancient Greek identity. For the duration of the games, typically 5 days, preceded by a month of training for athletes in Elis, a sacred truce, the Ikesharia was declared, theoretically ensuring safe passage for athletes and spectators across the warring city-states. This emphasis on peace, however, often masked the intense, often violent, nature of the competition itself. The very purpose of the games was to display physical prowess, a reflection of divine favor and human excellence. But the methods were anything but gentle. It truly sucked to watch religious violence. The sheer scale and significance of the games attracted participants and spectators from all corners of the Greek world, from the remote colonies of Magna Graecia, southern Italy, to the bustling city-states of mainland Greece. Victory at Olympia brought unparalleled fame, kleos, and glory to the athlete and his home city. A victor was hailed as a hero, immortalized in song and sculpture, and could receive immense honors upon his return home, including free meals for life, statues erected in his honor, and even citizenship in other city-states. This promise of immortal renown was a powerful motivator, driving athletes to push their bodies beyond human limits and to endure unimaginable suffering for victory. Imagine the intense pressure, the lifelong dream, resting on a single race or a single wrestling match. It truly sucked to put your life on the line for a laurel wreath. However, the pursuit of this glory came with an inherent brutal lie, the pervasive violence and constant risk of death or grievous injury that defined almost every event. These were not contests governed by strict safety regulations and elaborate protective gear. Instead, they were often raw, brutal tests of strength, endurance, and pain tolerance. where the line between competition and outright savagery was terrifyingly thin, the very atmosphere of the games, while steeped in religious awe, also crackled with intense, almost tribal, rivalry between city-states and individual athletes. Victory was paramount, defeat a profound humiliation. This fierce competitiveness fueled a no-holds-barred approach to many events, transforming athletic contests into desperate, visceral struggles where injury was an accepted, almost expected, outcome. The roar of the crowd, eager for spectacle, further encouraged this intensity, turning the athlete's suffering into entertainment. The conditions themselves contributed to the brutality. The stadium was a simple, unshaded track of earth or sand, exposing athletes to the relentless Greek sun. Training was rigorous and often unsophisticated by modern standards. Medical care was primitive, and understanding of hygiene was limited. All these factors combined to create an environment where the human body was pushed to its absolute limits, and often beyond, without the safety nets we take for granted today. One common misconception is that the ancient Olympic Games were always peaceful and purely about sportsmanship, while a sacred truce was declared. This truce only applied to safe travel to and from Olympia. It did not prevent wars from occurring during the Games, nor did it prevent intense, sometimes violent, rivalries between city-states and athletes during the contests themselves. Furthermore, the nature of many events, particularly the combat sports, was inherently brutal. Far from the sanitized image of modern Olympics, the rules were often minimal, and the emphasis was on endurance and decisive victory, sometimes at any cost. Historians still meticulously study ancient Greek literary accounts like those of Pausanias, Pindar, and Philostratus. Archaeological findings from Olympia, e.g., stadium remains, wrestling schools, and medical instrument fragments, and philosophical critiques of athletics to understand the precise nature of the contests, the strict rules or lack thereof in certain sports, and the profound physical toll on athletes, confirming the pervasive brutality beneath the veneer of glory. Furthermore, the very religious context of the Games, while seemingly benevolent, added another layer of pressure. Athletes competed not just for personal fame, but to honor Zeus and other gods. A victory was a sign of divine favor, a testament to piety and physical excellence. But a defeat, particularly an ignominious one, could be interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure, or a personal failing that reflected poorly on one's city-state. This elevated the stakes beyond mere athletic achievement to a profound spiritual and civic responsibility, making the prospect of failure even more terrifying. The atmosphere among the spectators was equally intense. Thousands of men, women were largely excluded, as we'll discuss, would cram into the stadium, enduring the heat, the dust, and the rudimentary conditions, their passions running high. Now, they cheered wildly for their favorites, but they could also be quick to express their displeasure, their demands for decisive victory fueling the brutal intensity of the contests. This immersive, passionate audience created a charged environment where athletes were pushed to perform. Regardless of their own pain or limits, the competitive landscape was fierce. Only freeborn Greek men were allowed to compete. But within that demographic, the drive for victory was absolute. There were no silver or bronze medals. Only the victor, the Olympianics, received the coveted olive wreath. This all-or-nothing approach meant that athletes pushed themselves to the absolute brink, often beyond reason, to achieve that singular prize, knowing that second place was effectively meaningless. This extreme focus on singular victory contributed directly to the brutal intensity and physical toll of the Games. So, your presence at the ancient Olympic Games revealed a grand illusion. Beneath the veneer of sacred peace and noble competition lay a brutal, bloody mess of intense physical demands, constant risk of grievous injury, and a pervasive spirit of ruthless competition. The promise of immortal glory, coupled with immense religious and civic pressures, compelled athletes to endure unthinkable suffering, ensuring that these iconic games were far more a test of raw endurance and violence than any romantic ideal of sportsmanship. Having stepped onto the dusty plains of Olympia, your initial awe at the grand spectacle quickly gave way to a startling realization this celebration of human excellence was built on profound exclusion. Forget universal participation. No women were allowed, making their systemic exclusion and the unsettling reality of nude male athletics in front of thousands a profoundly brutal, bloody mess. Imagine the pervasive silence of half the population. The ancient Olympic Games, despite their immense cultural significance, were exclusively for free-born Greek men. Women, regardless of their social status, whether citizen wives, foreign residents, or slaves, were strictly forbidden from participating in the games or even from attending as spectators. The penalties for a woman, especially a married woman, being caught observing the games were severe, often carrying a sentence of death by being thrown from Mount Typion. Imagine the chilling prospect being executed simply for trying to witness a sporting event. It truly sucked to be born the wrong gender in ancient Greece. This strict exclusion of women was deeply rooted in ancient Greek societal norms and the sacred nature of the games. The Olympic Games were primarily a religious festival honoring Zeus, the king of the gods. As such, they were seen as a sacred space for male purity and athletic prowess. The pervasive belief was that female presence, particularly married women, could somehow defile the sacred rites or distract the male athletes. This cultural and religious prohibition ensured a complete gender segregation at the most important Panhellenic festival. The physical reality of the athletes further emphasized this male-only environment. All male competitors performed nude. Imagine thousands of spectators, primarily men, watching male athletes wrestle, box, run, and throw javelins and discuses in their complete nakedness. This was not considered shameful or indecent. It was a celebration of the idealized male body, a testament to physical perfection and athletic prowess, seen as a reflection of divine favor. For the ancient Greeks, the nude male form in athletic competition was an artistic and philosophical ideal. For you, a female spectator, if you dared to defy the rules, the sight of thousands of naked male athletes, combined with the extreme heat, dust, and general squalor of the stadium, would be profoundly unsettling, or perhaps even an act of immense, life-threatening curiosity. For you, a female athlete, if you could even imagine such a thing, the complete denial of participation, despite any physical talent you might possess, would be a crushing reality, reducing your potential to a silent, unacknowledged aspiration. The only exception to the rule of female exclusion was the priestess of Demeter Chamine, who held a unique, privileged seat at the Olympic Stadium. Imagine this single woman, isolated in her designated seat, surrounded by thousands of cheering, naked male athletes and male spectators. A solitary female figure observing the strictly male proceedings. Her presence was a religious duty, not a casual attendance, highlighting, by contrast, the absolute exclusion of all other women. This unique detail underscores the pervasive nature of female exclusion. It really sucked to be the only woman allowed, and still not truly participate. The lack of any female athletic competition at the Olympic Games themselves meant that any athletic talent a woman possessed was irrelevant, while some other, lesser Greek festivals like the Heraean Games at Olympia, dedicated to Hera, which featured foot races for unmarried women, did exist. They were not part of the main Olympic spectacle and offered none of the prestige or fame associated with victory at Olympia for a talented female athlete. This systematic denial of a platform for competition, this inability to prove her physical prowess on the grandest stage, would be a profound and frustrating limitation. The social control over women in ancient Greece, particularly in cities like Athens, was significant. Women were largely confined to the household. Their roles focused on domestic duties and raising children, as discussed in the episode How Greek Democracy Was a Terrible System for Most People. Chapter 3. The Olympic Games, with their male-only participation and nudity, reinforced this patriarchal structure, serving as a powerful public affirmation of male dominance and female subservience in Greek society. This pervasive gender discrimination meant that half the population was entirely excluded from the most important Pan-Hellenic festival. Their existence and their potential largely ignored. One common misconception is that the nudity in the ancient Olympics was purely about aesthetics, while the celebration of the male body was central. It also served practical functions, preventing clothing from hindering movement or becoming caught, and emphasized a commitment to physical prowess without artificial enhancement. However, the cultural norms around male nudity in ancient Greece were vastly different from many other ancient civilizations like Rome, where public nudity was less common or viewed differently, highlighting a unique aspect of Greek athletic culture. Historians still meticulously study ancient Greek art statuary, vase paintings, philosophical texts, Plato's discussions of nudity in the Republic, and athletic commentaries to understand the precise cultural and social significance of nudity in the ancient Olympic Games, often finding a complex interplay of religious, aesthetic, and philosophical ideals. Furthermore, the very atmosphere of the stadium, with its thousands of roaring male spectators, their emotions running high during the brutal contests, would have been an intimidating and potentially dangerous environment for any female who dared to defy the rules and attend. The social pressure, the threat of detection, and the severe legal consequences would make any attempt to witness the games an act of extreme, almost suicidal, defiance. This pervasive and enforced exclusion was a profound psychological barrier, ensuring that your participation in the Olympic experience was either through secondhand accounts or by risking your very life. The psychological toll on women, particularly those with athletic aspirations or a strong sense of civic pride, would be immense. To live in a society that celebrated physical prowess and competitive excellence, yet systematically denied you any platform to participate, would breed a profound sense of frustration, marginalization, and unfulfilled potential. The glory and fame bestowed upon male victors would serve as a constant, bitter reminder of the opportunities denied to you simply because of your gender, your talents, your strength, your competitive spirit. All were deemed irrelevant in the grand spectacle of the games. Even the perceived risk of a woman influencing the male athletes through her presence was a justification for their exclusion, highlighting the deeply ingrained patriarchal views. The purity of the male athletic endeavor was paramount, and any external female influence was seen as a potential corrupting force. This reinforced the idea that women belonged in a separate sphere, far removed from the sacred, competitive realm of male athletics. So, the ancient Olympic Games, far from being a universal celebration of athleticism, were a profoundly brutal, bloody mess because no women were allowed. This strict exclusion, coupled with the unsettling reality of nude male athletics and the severe penalties for female spectatorship, ensured that half of the Greek population was systematically disenfranchised from birth, turning the grand spectacle into a powerful, public affirmation of male dominance and pervasive gender inequality. Having been confronted by the stark reality of gender exclusion and the prevalence of male nudity in the ancient Olympics, your attention as a spectator or aspiring athlete would inevitably be drawn to the very core of its spectacle, the brutal combat sports. Forget modern boxing gloves and wrestling mats. These were no-holds-barred contests of raw strength and savage endurance, where blood, guts, and broken bones were not just common, but celebrated, making the games profoundly brutal and bloody. Imagine the terrifying atmosphere in the stadium when these events began. The air, already thick with dust, and the shouts of thousands would tense with a visceral anticipation. These weren't gentle athletic displays. They were tests of martial prowess, of a man's ability to inflict and endure pain, often until one opponent was rendered unconscious, crippled, or dead. The rules were minimal, the mercy even scarcer, and the spectators, hungry for raw spectacle, would roar with approval at every crushing blow. It truly sucked to watch glorified street fights. The most infamous of these combat sports was Pankration. This was essentially an ancient form of mixed martial arts, combining elements of boxing and wrestling. But with almost no rules, imagine two naked men, their bodies oiled and glistening with sweat, locked in a savage embrace. There was no biting or gouging of eyes. These were the only explicit prohibitions. No weight classes, meaning a smaller, lighter man could be pitted against a much larger, heavier opponent. No rounds or time limits. The fight continued until one opponent surrendered, was knocked unconscious, or died. Striking was allowed: punches, kicks, elbows, knees, even blows to the head and body were permitted. Grappling and joint locks were allowed. Chokes, arm locks, leg locks, and submissions were all legal, designed to incapacitate or break bones. Imagine witnessing a Pankration match. The combatants would wrestle, punch, kick, and grapple with brutal efficiency. You might hear the sickening crack of a bone breaking, the muffled gasp of a man being choked unconscious, or the desperate screams of a fighter whose limb was twisted into an agonizing joint lock. Blood would flow freely, mixing with the dust and sweat on the scama, the wrestling pit. The fight would continue relentlessly, often ending only when one man was unable to continue, his body a battered, broken mess. Many died from internal injuries, broken necks, or strangulation. It truly sucked to see someone's arm get twisted into a pretzel for glory. Then there was boxing pygmakia. Forget padded gloves. Ancient Greek boxers wrapped their hands and forearms with Himation strips of leather, called himantes. These were not protective. They were designed to harden the fist and make blows more damaging. Often studded with metal in later periods, the castis of Roman boxing was even more brutal, often leading to disfigurement and death. The aim was to knock out your opponent or force him to surrender. There were no rounds, no weight classes, and no breaks for tired fighters. Punches were aimed at the head, the body, anywhere that could inflict damage. Imagine the horrifying sight of a boxer's face, a bloody, swollen mess. His eyes, perhaps completely closed from repeated blows, his teeth shattered, yet still forced to fight on until he collapsed. Head trauma, facial disfigurement, and brain damage were common. It really sucked to literally have your face punched in for a prize. Wrestling pale was less overtly bloody than boxing or pankration, but no less brutal. The goal was to throw your opponent to the ground 3 times, or to force him to surrender. However, techniques involved brutal holds, joint locks, and throws that could break bones, dislocate limbs, or cause severe internal injuries. Fighters would grapple in the dust, their bodies straining, muscles bulging. In a raw display of strength and pain tolerance, submissions could involve chokes or holds that rendered an opponent unconscious. Imagine the crunch of bodies hitting the hard ground, the grunt of exertion, and the terrified tap out of a man whose limb was being twisted to its breaking point. It truly sucked to fight a human pretzel. The lack of rules and protective gear amplified the brutality. No mouthpiece, no headgear, no groin protection. Every part of the body was a potential target, and every blow was intended to inflict maximum damage. The raw, unprotected nature of the combat made these sports incredibly dangerous, far beyond what any modern athletic commission would permit. The line between victory and permanent disablement, or death, was razor thin. The physical toll on the athletes was immense. Chronic pain, permanent disfigurement, broken noses, shattered teeth, cauliflower ears, and severe concussions were common occupational hazards for combat athletes. Many would carry the visible scars of their Olympic glory or defeat for the rest of their lives. If they lived long enough, their bodies were sacrificed for the fleeting applause of the crowd and the glory of their city-state. One common misconception is that all ancient Olympic sports were violent, while some, like running or discus, were less so. The combat sports pankration, boxing, wrestling were central to the games and were exceptionally brutal, often reflecting the warrior ethos of ancient Greek society. The level of violence was inherent in their design, aiming to push athletes to their physical and psychological limits, emphasizing endurance, aggression, and the will to dominate. The ideal was not mere participation, but decisive, often brutal. Victory. Historians still meticulously study ancient Greek medical texts, like those of Hippocrates, which detail various athletic injuries, archaeological findings of anatomical defects in ancient skeletal remains, and detailed descriptions from classical authors like Pausanias or Philostratus to understand the precise techniques and devastating impact of these combat sports, confirming their high level of brutality. Furthermore, the very concept of surrender in these events was often seen as a profound humiliation. An athlete would signal surrender by raising a single finger. To do so, especially in a prominent event, was to acknowledge utter defeat, to break before your opponent's will. This immense psychological pressure to fight on, even when severely injured, contributed directly to the extreme nature of the violence and the severity of the outcomes. You were expected to push beyond human limits, regardless of the pain. The crowd's reaction further fueled the brutality. They cheered for decisive blows, for agonizing submissions, and for the raw display of human suffering. Their collective roar would push athletes to greater extremes, subtly encouraging them to inflict more damage, to push harder. Even when a more humane end might be possible, the spectacle of violence was central to their entertainment, making the athletes' bodies instruments of public amusement. The psychological toll of repeatedly engaging in such brutal combat would be immense. You would live with the constant adrenaline, the fear of grievous injury or death, and the grim necessity of inflicting horrific violence on others, many of whom were your own social peers. The blurred lines between athletic contest and outright savagery would be disorienting, and the constant exposure to suffering would leave indelible scars on your psyche, leading to desensitization, nightmares, and perhaps even a chilling indifference to violence. You were trained to be a warrior, and the Olympics combat sports were your brutal proving ground, reinforcing your role as a professional fighting machine, even in sport. So, the ancient Olympic Games, far from a peaceful display of athleticism, were profoundly brutal and bloody because of the combat sports. Pankration, boxing, and wrestling were no rules. No mercy contests of raw strength and savage endurance, leading to horrifying injuries, disfigurement, and frequent death. This visceral, unfiltered violence was a defining, profoundly terrifying aspect of the games, ensuring that the pursuit of glory was literally etched in blood, guts, and shattered bodies. Even as you witnessed the raw, brutal chaos of the combat sports, your presence at the ancient Olympic Games would inevitably draw you to its most iconic, yet equally terrifying, spectacle chariot racing. Forget elegant speed and thrilling turns. This was a high speed, splinters and concussion, chaotic dash for victory, where spectacular death was common and often celebrated, making it a profoundly brutal and bloody mess. Imagine the Hippodrome Hippodromos, the massive, open-air stadium specifically designed for horse and chariot races. It was a colossal, elongated oval track, capable of seating tens of thousands of spectators. The ground beneath your feet and under the thundering hooves would be packed earth or sand, often dusty, offering little cushioning. The air would vibrate with the roar of the crowd, the frantic neighing of horses, and the distant, ominous rumble of approaching chariots. You could feel the sheer, untamed power of the animals even before they entered your view. It truly sucked to be in a dust bowl of death. The chariots themselves were incredibly lightweight and fragile. Designed for speed rather than durability, they were typically little more than a semicircular wooden frame, open at the back, mounted on two large, spoked wheels. The charioteer, standing upright within this flimsy contraption, was often lightly armored or even unarmored. Relying on skill and luck to survive, each chariot would be pulled by 2 or 4 horses, a baiga or quadriga, immense, powerful animals straining at their reins, their hooves thundering on the track. The reins would often be tied around the charioteer's waist, meaning if he fell, he risked being dragged to his death. This inherent fragility of the vehicle, combined with the immense power of the horses, made every race a terrifying gamble. It really sucked to literally have death strapped to your waist. The race itself was a spectacle of high-speed chaos. Chariots would line up at the starting gates, their drivers straining to control their powerful teams. The signal would be given, and the chariots would explode forward in a thunderous charge. A cloud of dust and frantic hooves. The track was wide, but with dozens of chariots vying for position, collisions were inevitable. The race involved multiple laps, sometimes as many as 12 around the central barrier, spina, which featured turning post medi at each end. These turns were the most dangerous points, where chariots would swerve, jostle for position, and often crash spectacularly. Collisions and crashes were terrifyingly common and often fatal. Imagine the chaos, splintering wood and flying debris when chariots collided. Their flimsy wooden frames would shatter, sending lethal splinters of wood flying through the air like shrapnel. Wheels would break, axles would snap, and horses would become entangled. Trampling a fallen charioteer or a downed horse risked being immediately trampled by the thundering hooves of other chariots thundering behind them. In the dense pack of racing vehicles, there was no time to react, no space to avoid. Death could come in an instant. a horrifying blur of hooves and wheels, being dragged if a charioteer's reins were tied around his waist and he fell. He could be dragged for hundreds of feet across the dusty track, his body battered and broken, his screams lost in the roar of the crowd, until the horses finally stopped or his body became unrecognizable, concussions and broken bones, even if not immediately trampled. A high-speed fall from a chariot would result in severe concussions, broken limbs, and internal injuries. The soft earth of the track offered little cushioning against the immense impact. The track itself, a simple earthen surface, would quickly become churned earth, dusty in dry weather, and a dangerous, slippery quagmire if it rained. This uneven surface increased the risk of horses stumbling or chariots losing control, adding another layer of unpredictable danger to an already terrifying contest. The dust raised by dozens of thundering hooves would be immense, often obscuring visibility and making breathing difficult for both charioteers and spectators. It truly sucked to breathe dust and fear. The crowds, tens of thousands strong, contributed to the pressure and the spectacle. They cheered wildly for thrilling maneuvers, for daring overtakes, and often for spectacular crashes. Their demands for excitement subtly encouraged charioteers to take greater risks, pushing them to their limits, knowing that a dramatic crash, however fatal, would be met with roaring applause, the pursuit of glory, and the immense prizes which could include immense wealth for the owner and fame for the charioteer, drove participants to the edge of recklessness. One common misconception is that chariot racing was primarily about the skill of the horses. While the horses were indeed crucial and highly valued, the skill and nerve of the charioteer were equally, if not more, important. Controlling a team of 4 powerful horses at high speeds, navigating tight turns, avoiding collisions, and subtly manipulating the race to your advantage, all while standing in a flimsy chariot and facing constant mortal danger, required immense strength, agility, and unwavering courage. Charioteers were highly paid professionals, revered as celebrities, but their fame came at the ultimate cost of their constant exposure to brutal, often fatal, accidents. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of chariot races, e.g., reliefs, mosaics, surviving parts of chariots, ancient literary descriptions like those of Homer, Pindar, or Sophocles, and the rules of the Olympic Games to understand the precise mechanics of these races and the unique dangers faced by charioteers, confirming their high mortality rates. Furthermore, the lack of any effective medical intervention for severe injuries meant that a crash often led to slow, agonizing death, a broken leg, internal bleeding, or a severe head injury sustained in a chariot crash would be untreatable by ancient Greek medicine, leading to a lingering, painful demise from infection, sepsis, or neurological complications. Your very life could be forfeit not by an opponent's direct action, but by a sudden, violent accident, leaving you to die slowly in the dust. The psychological toll of repeatedly engaging in such a high-speed, high-impact, and inherently dangerous contest would be immense. You would live with perpetual anxiety, the memory of past crashes your own or others haunting your thoughts. The roar of the crowd, while exhilarating, would also be a constant reminder of the demand for spectacle, pushing you to take greater risks. This relentless pressure to perform daring feats, knowing the terrifying consequences of a single mistake, would erode your peace of mind, leaving you a hardened, yet deeply traumatized, performer in a truly deadly game. So, the ancient Olympic Games, far from being a purely peaceful display of athleticism, were profoundly brutal and bloody because of chariot racing. This terrifying, high-speed chaos marked by splintering chariots, trampling hooves, and spectacular, often fatal, crashes was a defining, profoundly terrible aspect of the games. It ensured that the pursuit of glory was literally a dash for victory over wreckage and death, transforming the iconic spectacle into a horrifying test of speed, skill, and sheer survival against overwhelming odds. Even as you face the bone-shattering impacts of the joust and the brutal chaos of chariot races, your pursuit of glory in the ancient Olympic Games inevitably led to a grim consequence: wounds and, often, death, complicated by primitive medical care that turned agony into slow infection and physical ruin. This horrifying reality made your athletic career profoundly brutal and bloody. Imagine the immediate aftermath of a particularly fierce Pankration match or a devastating chariot crash. You might be lying on the churned earth of the Scama wrestling pit or the dusty track, your vision swimming, the roar of the crowd distant and muffled. Your body, once a sculpted testament to strength, now screams in protest, a searing, throbbing agony asserting itself where adrenaline once dulled the pain. Attendants, typically your trainers, fellow athletes, or perhaps temple staff with rudimentary medical knowledge, would rush to your side, desperately trying to assess the damage. This wasn't a sterile medical bay, it was a rough, public, and utterly unsanitary scene. It truly sucked to be a human wreck. Wounds were horrifyingly common and incredibly diverse, reflecting the array of ancient Greek athletic contests and the sheer force of physical impact. Concussions and head trauma, a direct punch to the head in boxing, a violent slam in wrestling or pankration, or a high-speed fall from a chariot could cause massive concussions, knocking you unconscious, leading to severe headaches, dizziness, memory loss, or even permanent brain damage. Repeated concussions, particularly in combat sports, could lead to chronic neurological issues over time, a silent and insidious form of decay. Imagine being knocked senseless, your vision blurring, your head pounding, only to be dragged away, your career potentially ended by a single unseen blow to the brain. Broken bones fractures were rampant. Limbs could be shattered by a powerful kick in pankration, ribs cracked by a wrestling hold, or collarbones broken by a fall. Chariot crashes frequently resulted in multiple fractures from splinters or impacts. Imagine the excruciating pain of a compound fracture, your bones protruding through your skin. Knowing that proper medical care was agonizingly primitive, internal injuries, blunt force trauma from a forceful blow in boxing or a violent slam in wrestling could cause severe internal bleeding or organ damage. Even if the skin remained unbroken, these invisible injuries were incredibly dangerous, leading to agonizing pain, swelling, and often a slow, agonizing death, days or weeks later. With no external signs of a mortal wound, confounding ancient physicians, you might simply waste away, your internal systems failing, without anyone truly understanding why. Lacerations and abrasions in wrestling and pankration, bodies rubbed against the dusty ground, causing severe abrasions, punches and kicks with split skin, leading to deep lacerations. These open wounds, exposed to the incredibly unsanitary environment of the stadium with its dust, sweat, and animal waste, were prime targets for infection. Joint dislocation and ligament tears, the extreme joint locks in pankration and wrestling, or sudden twists during running and jumping, frequently led to agonizing joint dislocation shoulders, knees, elbows, or severe ligament and tendon tears. Imagine feeling your joint pop out of place, followed by searing pain, knowing it might never fully heal correctly. leaving you with a permanent weakness or limp. Eye and ear trauma boxers, in particular, suffered severe trauma to their faces. Repeated blows could lead to broken noses, shattered teeth, disfigured ears like cauliflower ear, and severe eye injuries, including blindness from detached retinas or direct blows. Imagine having your face utterly mangled, your vision blurring, or your hearing fading. A permanent physical price for your athletic glory. The medical care available to you was frighteningly primitive. There were no sterile operating rooms, no anesthetics beyond perhaps some strong wine, opium, or a swift blow to the head to knock you unconscious. Your doctors were often gymnastei, trainers with practical experience in treating athletic injuries, or local physicians with knowledge passed down through generations. They were there to get you back in fighting shape, not to ensure your long-term health or comfort. It truly sucked to have your healing be so horrific. Wound treatment was basic and often horrifying. Deep cuts would be stitched with unsterilized needles and coarse thread, directly introducing bacteria into your bloodstream. Wounds might be cauterized with red-hot irons to stop bleeding, a terrifyingly painful process that also destroyed healthy tissue and increased the risk of infection. Herbal poultices, some with mild antiseptic properties like plantain or yarrow, might be applied, but others were utterly useless or even harmful. The pervasive risk of infection was immense. Every open wound was a potential death sentence, leading to pus, fever, gangrene, the putrefaction of tissue, and ultimately fatal sepsis, a systemic infection that would cause widespread organ failure and agonizing death. Many athletes who survived the initial trauma of a contest succumbed days or weeks later to infections that would be easily treatable today with antibiotics. Imagine surviving a brutal Pankration match, only to waste away from a fever, your life choked out by unseen pathogens. It really sucked to survive a fight only to die from a germ. Broken bones were set with rough splints made of wood and bandages, often without precise alignment. The healing process would be slow, agonizing, and frequently result in permanent deformities, chronic pain, or lifelong disability. Imagine a runner whose leg healed crookedly, leaving him with a permanent limp, or a wrestler whose arm could no longer fully extend or bear weight, rendering him unable to compete or perform manual labor. These lasting physical impairments would make any post-athletic life incredibly challenging and painful, a constant reminder of your past injuries. And then there was death. Despite the religious sanctity of the games, death was always a very real, terrifying possibility in the brutal combat sports and dangerous chariot races. An athlete could die instantly from a broken neck, a severe head injury, or a crushed torso. More often, death would come slowly and agonizingly from complications of severe wounds or rampant infection. The pursuit of Olympic glory literally had a built-in death clause, where winning a laurel wreath could cost you your life. Your demise, if it occurred, would be public, witnessed by thousands, making your suffering part of the spectacle. One common misconception is that ancient Olympic athletes, being paragons of physical excellence, were universally healthy and lived long, comfortable lives. In reality, the extreme demands of their training and the brutal nature of their contests, coupled with primitive medical care, meant they suffered frequent and severe injuries. Archaeological studies of ancient athletic cemeteries like those near major gymnasiums or athletic sites often reveal a high incidence of healed fractures, some clearly misaligned bone deformities, and signs of chronic joint disease. Particularly in athletes who engaged in combat sports, these osteological findings consistently confirm the profound physical toll of ancient athletic careers and the high rates of injury and early mortality. Historians still meticulously study ancient Greek medical texts like those attributed to Hippocrates, which detail various athletic injuries and treatments and philosophical discussions about the lives of athletes to understand the precise physical consequences of their brutal pursuits. Furthermore, the psychological toll of repeatedly facing such dangers, of witnessing your competitors suffer horrifying injuries or die gruesome deaths, would be immense. You would live with perpetual anxiety, the memory of pain and suffering etched into your mind, leading to nightmares, desensitization to violence, and perhaps even a chilling indifference to your own inevitable fate. This constant awareness of your own mortality, coupled with the brutal physical consequences, would make your life a profoundly miserable existence, dedicated to a fleeting moment of glory, the very spectacle of injury and blood, while horrifying, was often cheered by the crowds. The audience's demand for decisive victories and dramatic outcomes subtly pushed athletes to greater extremes, encouraging them to inflict more damage or take greater risks. Your suffering, your pain, your very blood became part of the entertainment, making your body a tool for public amusement and your injuries a testament to the crowd's insatiable thirst for spectacle. So, your experience at the ancient Olympic Games was defined by the profound and ever-present reality of wounds and death. The agonizing injuries from brutal combat sports and high-speed chariot crashes, coupled with primitive and often ineffective medical care, ensured that every contest was a gamble with your life, leading to chronic pain, permanent disfigurement, and often a slow, agonizing demise from infection. This visceral, physical toll was a defining, profoundly brutal and bloody reality of the ancient Olympic Games, ensuring that the pursuit of glory was literally etched in blood, guts, and shattered bodies, even as your body healed or failed to heal from the horrific wounds of the stadium. Your pursuit of glory in the ancient Olympic Games involved a complex and demanding stage for training and preparation. Forget casual workouts, the grueling regimen, the specialized diets, and the strict, often brutal. Masters pushed your body to its absolute limits, making your athletic career profoundly brutal and bloody. Imagine your daily life in the month leading up to the Games in Elis, the city-state responsible for organizing and overseeing the Olympics. All registered athletes were required to arrive in Elis at least a month before the Games began, to train under the supervision of the Hellanodikai, judges of the Games and specialized trainers. This was a final, intense boot camp designed to hone your body and mind for the ultimate competition. It truly sucked to be in a month-long athletic prison. Your training regimen would be relentless and highly demanding, tailored to your specific event. Combat athletes, pankration, boxing, wrestling. You would engage in hours of brutal sparring, grappling, and striking drills, constantly pushing your physical limits. The goal was to build immense strength, endurance, and pain tolerance. You'd practice specific techniques, learn to exploit an opponent's weaknesses, and develop the mental fortitude to endure prolonged combat. Injuries in training were common, but complaints were met with scorn or more rigorous exercises. Your body would be a constant landscape of bruises, sprains, and minor fractures, slowly hardening with each painful session. Runners, your training would focus on speed, explosive power, and endurance. You'd run endless sprints, practice starts, and endure long-distance runs for the dolichos. The long race, your feet, often bare, would harden to the dusty track, developing painful calluses and abrasions. The training was designed to optimize your running form and maximize your speed and stamina for the various foot races. Throwers, discus, Javelin. You would spend hours perfecting your technique, focusing on power, balance, and precision. Repeated throws would strain your shoulders, elbows, and back, putting immense pressure on your joints. You'd practice in open fields, constantly risking muscle tears or strains from improper form. Jumpers and pentathletes. Your training would be multifaceted, combining elements of running, jumping, throwing, and combat. This demanded a versatile physique and constant attention to various disciplines, pushing your body in multiple ways and increasing the risk of cumulative strain injuries. Your diet was also meticulously managed, though not always for holistic health. Athletes often followed specific dietary regimens, typically high in meat and cheese, a stark contrast to the peasant diet. As discussed in the episode, Why Your Daily Food in the Viking Age Utterly Sucked. To build strength and muscle mass, while this provided protein, the diet could be monotonous and lacked diverse, fresh produce, potentially leading to specific nutritional deficiencies over long periods. You would consume large quantities of simple, high-calorie foods to fuel your intense training, often without regard for flavor or variety. It really sucked to eat bland protein every single day. The coaches and masters gymnasti were strict, often brutal, disciplinarians. They wielded whips or rods, using physical punishment to enforce obedience, push athletes beyond their perceived limits, and instill unwavering discipline. Any perceived laziness, sloppiness in technique, or a moment of weakness could result in a swift and painful lashing. Imagine constantly striving for perfection, your body aching, your spirit weary, knowing that any mistake could bring the whip down on your back. This constant threat of corporal punishment created an atmosphere of fear and relentless pressure, ensuring absolute adherence to your training regimen. It truly sucked to have your coach be your tormentor. The training facilities themselves, the gymnasia and palaestra, while providing space for physical exercise, were often basic and unsanitary. You would train in open-air pits, skama for wrestling, exposing you to dust, heat, and the general effluvia of hundreds of sweating, straining bodies. There was no concept of sterile equipment or modern hygiene, meaning skin infections, fungal ailments, and the spread of common diseases were rampant. Your body, perpetually under stress, would be constantly battling unseen pathogens, making illness a common occurrence that could derail your training or even end your career. It really sucked to literally wrestle in a germ pit. The purpose of this grueling training was clear victory at any cost. The immense fame, kleos, and glory associated with an Olympic triumph, as discussed in Chapter 1, justified any hardship, any suffering. You were literally pushing your body to its breaking point, enduring unimaginable pain and discomfort, all for the fleeting honor of an olive wreath and the lasting pride of your city-state. This pursuit of ultimate victory left little room for self-care, long-term health, or a balanced life. One common misconception is that all ancient Olympic athletes were wealthy aristocrats who trained leisurely. In reality, while some elite athletes came from wealthy families, many were also professional athletes, especially in later periods, though the amateur ideal was often promoted, who trained intensely and rigorously to earn a livelihood through prizes, endorsements from their cities, and sometimes even financial rewards. The dedication and suffering required to reach Olympic levels meant a full-time commitment, often under harsh conditions. Regardless of social background, historians still meticulously study ancient Greek medical texts like those attributed to Hippocrates, detailing specific athletic injuries and their treatments. Philosophical discussions about the ethics of athletic training and GG Philostratus's Gymnasticus, and archaeological findings of ancient gymnasia, including training implements and skeletal remains of athletes to understand the precise training methods, diets, and the profound physical toll of ancient athletic careers, confirming their highly demanding and often brutal nature. Furthermore, the lack of specialized sports medicine meant that chronic injuries, which inevitably arose from such intense training, would be difficult to treat effectively. Overuse injuries, muscle tears, tendinitis, and joint problems would accumulate over years, often leading to chronic pain and permanent disability. You would learn to train through pain, pushing your body further, exacerbating minor issues into debilitating conditions simply because there was no alternative or effective treatment. Your body was a tool for performance, and it was expected to perform until it broke. The psychological toll of this relentless training was immense. You would live with perpetual exhaustion, your muscles constantly aching, your mind consumed by the need to push harder, to perform flawlessly. The constant pressure from your trainers, the fierce competition with your peers, and the unwavering expectation for victory would create a profound sense of anxiety and mental strain. Your dedication to your craft transformed your life into a continuous cycle of physical and mental agony, all for the elusive chance at fleeting glory. The dietary regimen, while emphasizing protein and calories, could also be monotonous and lacked variety. Imagine consuming large quantities of meat and cheese, day in and day out, supplemented by barley, without the benefit of diverse fruits, vegetables, or complex culinary preparations. This lack of culinary pleasure, combined with the extreme physical demands, made eating a functional necessity rather than an enjoyable experience, contributing to the overall misery of your training. So, your path to Olympic glory was consumed by a relentless, often agonizing, training regimen and preparation. From brutal sparring and grueling runs to specialized diets and strict masters, every aspect of your physical and mental being was pushed to its absolute limits, often through pain and discomfort. This pervasive, physically destructive toil, ensuring your body was forged into a weapon for victory, was a defining, profoundly brutal and bloody aspect of your athletic career, ensuring that the ancient Olympic Games were built on a foundation of profound human suffering, even as you poured your lifeblood into the brutal training and endured the physical agony of the contests. Your pursuit of Olympic glory, if successful, brought a paradoxical and often fleeting reward, fickle fame. Forget lasting adoration or guaranteed comfort. Victory in the ancient games often came with crushing scrutiny, the potential for profound humiliation and defeat, and a pervasive sense of precariousness that made your athletic career profoundly brutal and bloody. Imagine the pinnacle of your athletic career. You have just won an Olympic event. The roar of the crowd is deafening. Thousands of spectators chanting your name. A herald proclaims your victory. You are crowned with the sacred olive wreath kotinos, a simple garland but a symbol of unparalleled prestige. You are led in a triumphant procession, hailed as an Olympionyx, an Olympic victor, and a hero to your city-state. Your statue might be commissioned, your name immortalized in song by poets like Pindar, and you might receive immense honors upon your return home, such as free meals for life sites, front row seats at public games, or even a monetary reward from your city. This moment of pure, unadulterated glory would be exhilarating, a fleeting taste of divine favor that seemed to justify all your suffering. It truly sucked to be a one-hit wonder. Eternally. However, This immense fame was often incredibly fickle and conditional. Your glory was tied to that one moment, that single victory. Your reputation could vanish as quickly as it appeared, dependent on your latest performance, the continued success of your athletic career, or the shifting whims of the public if you failed to win in subsequent games, or if you suffered a public defeat. Your previous triumph might be quickly forgotten, or worse, your perceived decline could become a subject of ridicule. Imagine being a former Olympic champion, but now struggling to maintain your form, constantly reminded of your past glory and your present inability to replicate it. It truly sucked to be a has-been at 30. The scrutiny you faced as an Olympic victor was intense and unyielding. Your life became a public spectacle. Every aspect of your behavior, your training, your diet, and your personal conduct would be observed and discussed. You were expected to embody the ideals of Greek excellence, both physical and moral. Any perceived weakness, any sign of indulgence, or any deviation from the rigorous discipline that supposedly defined your life could lead to public criticism and tarnish your hard-won reputation. This constant pressure to maintain a perfect image, to live up to the immense expectations placed upon you, was a profound psychological burden, leaving you with little true privacy or relaxation. It really sucked to be a perfect role model. And then there was the crushing humiliation of defeat. In the ancient Olympics, there were no silver or bronze medals. Only the victor received the coveted olive wreath. Second place was effectively meaningless for an athlete who had dedicated years of his life to grueling training, endured immense pain, and made countless sacrifices. A defeat, especially a public one, could be devastating. It brought profound shame not only upon the athlete himself, but also upon his family and his city-state. Imagine returning home after a crushing defeat, facing the silent disappointment of your fellow citizens, knowing you had failed to bring glory to your polis. Some defeated athletes reportedly went into voluntary exile, unable to face the shame. It truly sucked to be a loser in a society that only celebrated winners. This intense focus on victory and the profound humiliation of defeat created a pervasive culture of all-or-nothing competition. Athletes were driven to push themselves beyond reason, to employ any means, even illicit ones, as we'll discuss in Chapter 8, to secure victory, precisely because the consequences of failure were so severe. The games, for all their grandeur, were a brutal contest where glory was singular and everything else was a testament to failure. The financial implications of fame were also paradoxical. While victors could receive immense rewards from their home cities, the life of an athlete after his prime was often uncertain. The rigorous training meant many athletes had no other marketable skills. If injuries ended your career prematurely, a common occurrence, as discussed in Chapter 5, or if your fame simply faded. You might struggle to find sustainable employment. The free meals for life offered by some cities were a prestigious honor, but they rarely constituted true wealth or a secure future, especially if your city's fortunes declined. Your glory was not a guarantee of lifelong prosperity. One common misconception is that all ancient Olympic victors lived out their lives in continuous celebration and comfort. In reality, while some achieved enduring fame and political influence, many faced the challenges of maintaining their reputation, dealing with injuries, and securing a livelihood after their athletic careers ended. The transition from intense physical discipline and public adoration to a more mundane existence could be difficult, and their fame, while prestigious, did not always translate into lasting financial security or personal happiness. Historians still meticulously study biographical fragments, inscriptions, and later philosophical discussions about the lives of Olympic victors to understand the precise long-term benefits and challenges of their fame, often finding a more nuanced and sometimes tragic picture. Furthermore, the very act of displaying your victory, commissioning a statue, or having an ode sung in your honor, was a profound psychological act that underscored your individual achievement. Yet it also made you a constant target for public scrutiny and the fickle judgment of future generations. Your enduring fame was a double-edged sword, perpetually reminding you of the expectations and the potential fall from grace. The comparison to the divine also added a unique burden. Olympic victors were sometimes likened to gods or heroes, their physical perfection a reflection of divine favor. This elevated status, while immensely flattering, also created an impossible standard. You were expected to remain a paragon of excellence, a living ideal, which was an immense psychological pressure for any mortal man. Ensuring that your fame was a constant weight, the psychological toll of living in the spotlight, of constantly striving to maintain an impossible ideal, and of enduring the profound shame of defeat would be immense. You would live with pervasive anxiety, always aware of the public gaze, always fearing the inevitable decline that comes with age or injury. This relentless pressure to perform, to be a hero, even off the track, would erode your spirit, leaving you exhausted and perhaps cynical about the fleeting nature of glory. Your quest for fame, once a powerful motivator, became a profound source of misery. So, your experience at the ancient Olympic Games was profoundly brutal and bloody, because your pursuit of victory brought a paradox of fickle fame. Your triumphs brought immense glory and fleeting adoration. But this came with relentless public scrutiny, the crushing humiliation of defeat, and a pervasive sense of precariousness. This paradoxical pursuit of renown, ensuring your life was a continuous battle against the unpredictable whims of public opinion and the inevitable decline of your athletic prowess, was a defining, profoundly terrible aspect of the Games, even as you, the Olympic athlete, battled for fickle fame and endured the profound humiliation of defeat. The sacred nature of the ancient Games was often undermined by a darker, more insidious reality: bribery and cheating. Forget pure sportsmanship and noble competition. The relentless pursuit of victory led to pervasive corruption and ruthless tactics, making the Olympic Games profoundly brutal and bloody. Imagine the immense stakes involved. An Olympic victory brought unparalleled glory, not just to the athlete, but to his home city-state. It could mean immense wealth, social honors, and even political influence. This astronomical reward, coupled with the all-or-nothing nature of the contest, only the victor received a prize, as discussed in Chapter 7, created a powerful temptation to win at any cost, regardless of the sacred rules or ethical considerations. It truly sucked when sacred games were just a rigged show. Bribery, dorodokia. Dorodokia was a common and well-documented form of cheating. Athletes, their trainers, or their wealthy patrons would attempt to bribe opponents to deliberately lose a contest or to underperform. Imagine the whispered offers in the training camps in Elis, the clandestine meetings, the exchange of coin for a guaranteed victory. A talented athlete, desperate for the olive wreath, might be tempted to offer a substantial sum to a rival to throw a race or a combat match. This undermined the very spirit of fair competition, turning athletic prowess into a negotiable commodity. It really sucked to be offered money to lose. Beyond bribing opponents, there were attempts to bribe judges, helanodikai, The Hellenodikai were highly respected citizens of Elis, chosen for their integrity and tasked with overseeing the games, enforcing rules, and judging contests fairly. However, even these esteemed officials were not immune to corruption. A wealthy patron, desperate for his athlete to win, might offer immense sums to sway a judgment, to overlook a foul, or to declare a dubious victory. If such a bribe was discovered, it would be a massive scandal, bringing shame upon all involved. Cheating on the field of play itself was also rampant. Despite the supposed honor of the games, athletes might sabotage opponents in combat sports. Athletes might try to subtly injure a rival during a sparring session before the actual contest, hoping to weaken them. In chariot races, charioteers might deliberately try to cut off rivals, cause collisions, or even subtly whip an opponent's horses. False starts in races, runners might try to gain an unfair advantage by starting before the signal, hoping to avoid detection by the officials. Using illegal techniques in combat sports, despite rules. The heat of the moment and the desire for victory might lead a wrestler or pancratius to attempt forbidden moves, like eye-gouging, which was generally forbidden in Pankration. But attempted disguise or false identity, though rare, some might attempt to compete under a false name or in a category for which they were not eligible. The consequences for cheating, if caught, were severe and publicly humiliating. Athletes caught bribing or engaging in foul play faced public flogging, a brutal physical punishment, often administered by the Hellenodikai themselves, designed to inflict pain and shame. Heavy fines, substantial monetary penalties would be levied against the offending athlete and their home city-state. These fines were then used to erect bronze statues of Zeus Zane's statues along the entrance to the stadium at Olympia, inscribed with details of the offense and the names of the cheats. Imagine the eternal shame your disgrace literally cast in bronze, serving as a permanent warning to all who entered the sacred grounds. It truly sucked to be immortalized for being a cheat, disqualification, and banishment. The athlete would be immediately disqualified from the games and permanently banned from future competitions. Their name would be removed from the list of competitors, and their personal glory would be utterly erased, replaced by an indelible mark of shame. Shame to the city-state. The shame of cheating extended beyond the individual. It brought immense dishonor upon the athlete's home city-state, which would have to pay the fine and endure the public condemnation. This collective humiliation meant that pressure to play fair, or at least to not get caught, was immense. The fact that the Olympic authorities actively implemented such severe punishments and erected the Zanes statues indicates that cheating was not a rare occurrence, but a persistent problem that required strong deterrence. The presence of these monuments to dishonor served as a constant, visible reminder that even in the sacred games, the human drive for victory could lead to profound corruption. One common misconception is that the ancient Olympic Games were purely noble and free from corruption. While the ideal was certainly one of pure competition and honor, historical accounts and archaeological findings revealed that bribery, cheating, and foul play were unfortunately common throughout much of the games' history. The immense stakes and rewards of victory often tempted athletes and their patrons to violate the sacred truce and the spirit of fair play. The Zanes statues, specifically, serve as direct, physical evidence of widespread cheating. Historians still meticulously study ancient inscriptions like those on the Zanes statues themselves, classical commentaries, and philosophical discussions like Plato's critiques of professional athletes to understand the prevalence, types, and motivations for cheating in the ancient Olympics, confirming it as a pervasive issue. Furthermore, the very secrecy surrounding some acts of bribery and cheating contributed to a pervasive atmosphere of suspicion. Athletes might eye their rivals with distrust, wondering if their opponent's strength was truly natural or if their victory was due to unseen magical interference or illicit deals. This added a psychological layer of paranoia to the already intense competition, eroding the spirit of genuine sportsmanship. The psychological toll on an athlete who succumbed to cheating, even if successful, would be immense. Living with the knowledge that your victory was tainted by dishonesty, that your glory was undeserved, would create a profound internal conflict. The constant fear of exposure, of public shame, and of having your name etched in ignominy on a Zane's statue would gnaw at your peace of mind, transforming your hard-won triumph into a source of perpetual anxiety and regret. Your pursuit of victory, once noble, would become a profound source of self-disgust. The system itself, by offering such immense rewards for singular victory, paradoxically encouraged this corruption. When second place was essentially meaningless, the incentive to ensure first place, by any means necessary, became overwhelming, leading talented athletes down a path of dishonor and ultimately profound self-betrayal. So, your experience at the ancient Olympic Games was profoundly brutal and bloody because of bribery and cheating, the pervasive corruption, the ruthless tactics employed to gain an unfair advantage, and the harsh public consequences for those caught violating the sacred rules ensured that even in the sacred games, the pursuit of victory was often tainted by profound dishonesty. This pervasive shadow of dishonor, constantly threatening to undermine the ideals of fair play, was a defining, profoundly terrible aspect of the games, ensuring that glory was often achieved through means far from noble, and leaving a legacy of shame literally carved in stone, even as you, the cheat, face the chilling prospect of a Zane's statue bearing your name. Your life as an ancient Olympic athlete was haunted by a different, equally terrifying shadow. Punishment for cheating. Forget a simple disqualification. The consequences for violating the sacred rules of the games were brutal, public, and designed to inflict profound shame and lasting disgrace, making your pursuit of glory profoundly brutal and bloody. Imagine the terrifying moment of discovery. Perhaps a rival athlete or a vigilant official, one of the Hellenan Odikai, caught you in the act of a false start, or detected a suspicious substance on your body, or uncovered evidence of a bribe. The accusation itself would be a public disgrace. Echoing through the sacred altis, you would be brought before the Hellenodikai, the venerable judges of the games, known for their strict impartiality and unwavering commitment to the sacred rules. Your pleas of innocence, however fervent, would likely be dismissed in the face of compelling evidence or the stern judgment of the officials. It truly sucked to be a public disgrace. The punishments for cheating were severe and publicly humiliating, designed not just to punish the individual, but to deter others and to symbolically cleanse the sacred games of any impurity. Public flogging. This was a common and agonizing punishment. You would be subjected to a public flogging within the stadium, often administered by the Hellenodikai themselves or their appointed assistants. Imagine being stripped bare, or nearly so, and lashed repeatedly with a whip or rod in front of thousands of spectators. The searing pain, the tearing of your flesh, and the profound humiliation of such a public beating, witnessed by your peers, your countrymen, and potentially even your family, would be immense. Your body, once a source of glory, was now a canvas for shame, marked by the welts and bruises of your transgression. This wasn't just physical pain, it was a psychological assault designed to break your spirit and reputation. It really sucked to literally be whipped for cheating. Heavy fines. Both you, the offending athlete, and your home city state would be levied with substantial monetary penalties. These fines were often immense, capable of bankrupting your family or putting a significant financial strain on your city. The money collected from these fines was then used for a very specific and chilling purpose: to erect bronze statues of Zeus Zane's statues. These statues were placed along the sacred processional way leading into the Olympic Stadium. Near the starting line, each statue would bear an inscription detailing the offense, the name of the cheating athlete, and the specific circumstances of the fraud. Imagine the eternal shame your disgrace literally cast in bronze, serving as a permanent, visible warning to every athlete who entered the sacred grounds, a testament to your dishonor. It truly sucked to have your shame etched in bronze for eternity. Disqualification and banishment. You would be immediately disqualified from the event and permanently banned from all future Olympic Games and other Pan-Hellenic festivals. Your name would be removed from the official lists of competitors and victors, and any laurels or prizes you might have won even legitimately in other events could be stripped from you. You would be sent away in utter disgrace, unable to participate in the athletic life that defined so much of ancient Greek identity. Your athletic career, your hard-won fame, would be utterly obliterated, replaced by an indelible mark of public shame. Shame to the city-state. The shame of your cheating extended beyond the individual. It brought immense dishonor upon your home city-state, which would have to pay the heavy fine and endure the public condemnation. This collective humiliation meant that your polis, which once celebrated your glory, would now perhaps resent your disgrace. Having invested so much in your training and reputation, this collective responsibility put immense pressure on athletes to uphold the rules, not just for personal honor, but for civic pride. The public nature of these punishments was crucial for their deterrent effect. The authorities wanted to instill maximum fear and uphold the sacred integrity of the games. Your agonizing flogging, your publicly disgraced name on the Zane's statue, and your permanent banishment served as a powerful, visceral warning to all who might contemplate violating the sacred rules. The spectators, who once cheered your triumphs, would now witness your humiliation, their moral sensibilities reinforced by your suffering. It really sucked to be a living, breathing warning sign. One common misconception is that cheating in the ancient Olympics was rare due to the sacred nature of the games. In reality, while the ideal of agon struggle, competition was central. The immense stakes, fame, wealth, civic honor combined with human ambition meant that bribery, foul play, and rule-breaking were unfortunate, but persistent. Problems throughout much of the game's long history. The existence of numerous Zane's statues' archaeological findings have confirmed several, with their inscriptions detailing various cheating offenses is direct. Physical evidence of widespread cheating and the persistent efforts by the Helle and Odikai to combat it. This indicates that the sacred games were far from immune to human corruption. Historians still meticulously study these inscriptions, classical texts which sometimes describe specific cheating incidents, and legal commentaries to understand the precise types, motivations, and prevalence of cheating, confirming it as a pervasive issue. Furthermore, the psychological toll on an athlete who was caught cheating would be immense. You would live with the profound, indelible shame of your actions, forever known as a cheat, your name etched in bronze ignominy, your reputation, once your most valuable asset, would be irrevocably destroyed. You would be banished from the athletic world you dedicated your life to, and often from your home city's civic life. The self-loathing, the regret, and the constant awareness of your public disgrace would gnaw at your spirit. leaving you isolated and haunted by your past. This mental anguish, this profound loss of honor, was often far more brutal than any physical flogging. The very concept of the Helan Odikai, judges of the games, as impartial and incorruptible was central to the game's legitimacy. Their role in detecting and punishing cheats, and their willingness to impose such severe penalties, underscored the seriousness with which the game's integrity was viewed. Your punishment, therefore, was a demonstration of their power and the sanctity of the Olympic rules, making you a direct victim of the system's enforcement. The enduring visual reminder of the Zane statues was a particularly cruel form of punishment. Unlike a public flogging, which was temporary, the statue stood for centuries. A permanent testament to the cheater's disgrace. Imagine your descendants, generations later, walking past your family's name inscribed on a statue of ignominy at the entrance to the sacred stadium. This collective shame, extending beyond your own lifetime, was a unique and powerful deterrent, ensuring that the legacy of your dishonor outlived your very body. So, your experience at the ancient Olympic Games was profoundly brutal and bloody because the punishment for cheating was swift, agonizing, and publicly humiliating. From public floggings and heavy fines used to erect statues of shame, to permanent disqualification and banishment. The consequences for violating the sacred rules were designed to inflict profound physical and reputational damage. This terrifying system, ensuring that dishonor was literally etched in stone, was a defining, profoundly terrible aspect of the games, ensuring that the pursuit of glory was always overshadowed by the chilling threat of utter disgrace. You've endured the intense competition, the brutal chaos of combat sports, the bone-shattering impacts of chariot racing, suffered horrifying wounds and agonizing medieval medical care, trained relentlessly under strict masters, navigated the paradox of fickle fame, and finally, faced the crushing public humiliation and permanent disgrace of being punished for cheating. As the distant roar of the stadium fades and the imagined dust of the skama finally settles, a profound, lingering truth settles upon you: the ancient Olympic Games, far from being a utopian ideal of pure sportsmanship, were a brutal, bloody, and intensely demanding spectacle built on raw human grit, profound physical suffering, and a pervasive undercurrent of ruthless competition and harsh consequences. Consider the fundamental paradox of glory that defined your athletic life. You pursued the coveted olive wreath, a symbol of unparalleled fame and honor, believing it would immortalize your name and bring glory to your city-state, yet this pursuit condemned you to immense physical agony. Your body was pushed beyond its limits, sustaining horrific injuries, shattered bones, brain-damaging concussions, and disfiguring facial trauma, all without modern medical recourse. The very contest designed to celebrate human excellence often broke human bodies, highlighting a grim trade-off between ephemeral triumph and lasting physical ruin. It truly sucked to be famous for being broken. Then there's the unrelenting savagery of the contests. Combat sports like Pankration and boxing were no-holds-barred spectacles of raw violence, where the goal was to incapacitate or kill, not merely to score points. Chariot racing was a high-speed, chaotic dash for victory, where spectacular crashes and trampling deaths were common. The demand for decisive outcomes and dramatic displays, fueled by the bloodthirsty roar of the crowd, often pushed athletes to inflict and endure unimaginable suffering. This pervasive brutality was not an accidental byproduct. It was an inherent design feature, ensuring the games were a visceral test of ultimate endurance and a brutal affirmation of physical dominance? And what about the chilling reality of pervasive cheating and brutal punishment despite their sacred status? The games were rife with corruption. The immense stakes of victory led athletes, trainers, and patrons to resort to bribery, sabotage, and foul play. And when caught, the consequences were swift, public, and agonizing. Public floggings, immense fines used to erect statues of shame, Zane's statues forever proclaiming your dishonor, and permanent banishment from all games. These were the brutal prices paid for violating the sacred rules. This pervasive shadow of dishonesty and its severe public retribution ensured that even victory, if attained by illicit means, was tainted by the constant threat of ultimate disgrace. It truly sucked to be dishonored for eternity. Finally, the profound human cost masked by grand spectacle. The ancient Olympic Games were a colossal cultural, religious, and political event, drawing tens of thousands of spectators to Olympia. The grandeur of the temples, the religious rituals, and the ideal of athletic excellence created a powerful illusion of noble pursuit. But beneath this glittering veneer lay the raw reality of immense human suffering. Athletes sacrificing their bodies, enduring pain, and facing death, often for fleeting fame and the glory of a city-state that largely controlled their lives. Your triumph was a city celebration, but your suffering was entirely your own. Your pursuit of glory was fundamentally rooted in exploitation and brutal endurance. The legacy of the ancient Olympic Games, while profoundly influential in the history of sport and human ideals, is one that modern historians increasingly view through the lens of its harsh realities. They were revolutionary for their time, emphasizing individual athletic achievement and promoting a form of inter-city-state competition. However, they were also deeply rooted in the violent, competitive, and often unequal social structures of ancient Greece. Their brilliance coexisted with a pervasive brutality that shaped the lives of every participant. One particularly poignant and often overlooked detail is the silence surrounding defeat. While Olympic victors were immortalized in song and sculpture, those who lost, especially in prominent events or after a long career, often faced profound shame and obscurity. There were no participation trophies, no consolation prizes. A defeated athlete might literally face public ridicule or ostracism upon returning home. This extreme binary outcome, absolute glory or utter disgrace, placed an immense psychological burden on athletes, driving them to push beyond their limits, but also ensuring that for every celebrated victor, there were dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals who carried the lifelong scars of public failure and personal disappointment. This cultural emphasis on singular victory made even honorable defeat a terrible burden. Historians still meticulously study ancient Greek epinetian odes, celebrating victory, and philosophical discussions about failure to understand the precise psychological and social consequences for defeated athletes. Confirming the harsh reality of their post-Games lives, ultimately, your experience at the ancient Olympic Games was a truly brutal, bloody mess. It was a grand spectacle, yes, but one that consumed bodies, shattered lives, and often ended in disgrace or death. The allure of glory was undeniable, but it came at an exorbitant price: relentless physical pain, constant psychological pressure, the pervasive threat of severe injury or death, and the chilling prospect of public humiliation for failure or fraud. The shining ideal of ancient athleticism masked a life of intense suffering, ensuring that your participation in this iconic event was a true endurance test, leaving you with a legacy forged in blood, sweat, and the stark truth that glory often comes with a very heavy, brutal cost. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the distant roar of the ancient stadium and the imagined agony of its combatants finally subside. You are safe, in your own time, far removed from the brutal realities of ancient sport. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the quiet certainty of fair play, the profound comfort of safety in competition, and the freedom to pursue your passions without such horrifying consequences. A stark contrast to the brutal and bloody truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night and have sweet dreams.